Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me on Phantoms Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, tonight's show, Otherworldly and Divine Interventions are awe inspiring characteristics of events and occurrences that cannot be explained by natural or scientific laws, many times pointing directly to the miraculous. Now, these interventions often occur unexpectedly, breaking into the natural flow of life at precisely the right moment. Now, some experiencers believe that these incidents are a direct response to sincere prayers, supplications, and intentional affirmations. As a result, it may bring peace and assurance to the witness. Now, I've chosen a few examples of accounts that I've received from experiencers who felt compelled to contact me. But be aware that not all interventions achieve favorable satisfaction. So before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking and subscribing on the subscribe and like buttons, and by you sharing our programming. If you're watching this on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below in the chat box. The Buy Me a Coffee link and other donation links are also shown in the description. Thanks for your consideration. Now, your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. And again, I want to thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, for their commitment to the channel and to myself, as well as Kevin and Mary at ESP Network. Now, if you're in the chat and you have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. So in this first account, the witness states, I believe I was about 16 and living in Trinity, New Mexico. My best friend and I were leaving the house to pick up my other friend. We took my Toyota 4Runner, but I let her drive. We turned on some music, and right before we started down my long, steep gravel driveway, I noticed that she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. I told her to stop and put it on. She did, but only put on the bottom half of it and put the shoulder part behind her. So we started down my driveway and started down the rest of the road, which is also gravel. I remember looking at her and then all of a sudden being upside down. We had gotten into a crash. Now, to this day, I really don't know what had happened. She wasn't going very fast, but she went around a corner, did a 360, hit the ditch, and rolled 3 times. We figured this out by the tire marks in the glass on the ground. Now, I don't remember except waking up and hearing the horn going off, looking over and seeing her head against the wheel. The next thing I know, I'm out of the car sitting next to her on the side of the road in shock. Now, I was wearing PJ pants with deep pockets, and thankfully my cell phone was in there. I didn't think to call 911 since my house was right up the hill and my parents were home. I tried to dial my mom with no luck. I was in shock and I kept dialing the wrong number. Thankfully, the number was disconnected and no one else picked up. Finally, I dialed the right number my mom picked up. All I could say was that we'd been in a car accident and I started crying. My mom and dad drove down to find me sitting on the ground still with my friend was walking off muttering. "I could have killed you," over and over, she said. My mom checked on me and ran and grabbed my friend. My dad came to me and checked on me. Now, he's an EMT, and he didn't think we needed to call 911. My friend and I were both in shock with bruises and cuts, but we were okay. Now, my parents drove us back to the house to get us cleaned up and try to calm us down. So my dad went back down to the car to get it checked out. Here's where it gets strange. The doors were so smashed he could not even open them. We have no idea how we got out of the car, as neither of us has any memory of it. Yes, the windows were broken, but the car was upright, and I don't think we crawled out of them. The airbags, for some reason, didn't deploy, which might have actually saved us from worse injuries. The weirdest part was still coming up. The car had rolled and it was obvious that it had landed on its side on the driver's side, but somehow bounced back to an upright position afterward because the car was upright when we got out. I guess with enough momentum it could have been done, but my dad found something very strange on the car on the driver's side. There were handprints, but not normal handprints. They only had 4 fingers and were a lot longer than normal hands. Even typing this now, it still gives me chills and I'm tearing up and I don't even know why. He was a bit shocked by this and started taking pictures of the handprints. He came back to the house and told my mom about it and showed us all the pictures, which were really strange. I wanted to go look, but we were both sore from the accident and still a bit of shock. We didn't do anything with the car that night. It was evening when the accident happened. So anyway, the car was off to the side of the road. The next day, my dad towed, more like dragged, the car back to the house. Sure enough, there were handprints all on the side, 4 fingers, and they were extra long. There were at least 5 sets of handprints on all the driver's side and 1 set on the passenger side. Now, if that isn't weird enough, when my mom went and got my friend from walking, she asked where the man had gone. My mom asked, "What man?" She gave this description of a tall man with dark hair wearing a weird old military uniform. She described my grandfather to a T. He had passed away before I was born. She had never seen any pictures of him and never knew he was in the military. It was just never brought up before. She said he walked with her and sat with her. So many weird things happened in that car accident. It could have even been much worse. Thankfully, we were both okay and my car was not so much. It was totaled. We never figured out the handprints. Yes, we do have a few neighbors, and if they were home, there's no way they would have not have heard the car, but they are all the kind of neighbors who probably not helped anyway. I wish we still had the pictures. I would love to send them to you, but they were lost a long time ago when the computer crashed. So in this next account, the witness tells me, I was in Los Angeles at my mom's house while my friend was still visiting our other friend who had just moved to Roswell, New Mexico. All of a sudden, I got a text from Lee. She was very frightened and wanted to know if there were such things as aliens for real. She felt that something was going to happen to her. She texted me everything that was happening to her as it happened, and I could tell by the way that she was typing her words that she was terrified and scared for her life. I became very frightened myself as I read her text. I kept telling her to call me, but she wouldn't. She just continued texting, and finally she said she didn't want to call because they would hear her. Anyway, this is the story she told me about what happened to her that night. Now she was coming back from a late night call in Hobbs, New Mexico, like 2 a.m., and she still had several miles to go to reach the house where she was staying in Roswell. She said she saw a light in the sky zoom past her from the front. Then suddenly she became aware of very bright lights behind her car that seemingly came out of nowhere, but were following her car in very close proximity and resembled the headlights of a car, except that there was no other car visible attached to them. It was that the lights themselves were floating and following her. Now, when she'd speed up, it would speed up very close to her car. When she'd slow down, they would slow down even more to the point where they were no longer close to her car anymore. But they would stall away further behind so she could still not get a very good look at the vehicle behind her. Then she'd speed up to 100 mile an hour at one point because she was trying to see how far they would go to keep up with her, and they were almost glued to her bumper at that point. They had no problem staying right along with her at that speed, yet they wouldn't pass her. Now, while she was driving very fast, trying to shake the lights, the inside of the car filled up with a noise that she could not put into words. She said it seemed to be coming from her purse beside her, and it was a loud and terrifying sound, unlike anything she had ever heard before, and she felt that at that moment it were trying to make her crash. She started noticing all the skid marks on the road that were going off the road in the same direction and how many of them there were, one after another. It's almost like 30 sets of skid marks, all within a 1 mile stretch of road that she felt was designated for that purpose, and she felt that it was intended for her to do the same. She got the idea that they were amused by her fear and that they could read her mind, and that's why she was afraid to call me, because she felt like they would hear her. Now, almost as fast as the lights appeared, they disappeared, and she resumed her driving normally till she reached her friend's house. She was so scared she couldn't even get out of the car. Our friend had to come and get her. Now, she got very ill the next day, and she couldn't get out of bed. She was terribly sick for 2 days. Now, before the incident occurred, she was not one to really care too much one way or the other about other life forms, and she bordered on disbelief in anything that she couldn't see for her own eyes. She's now a firm believer in alien life forms, and she also believes that they were trying to run her off the road that night, and they had run several people off the road before, evidenced by the many skid marks that were veering off the road in the same direction in that 1 little mile stretch of highway. The other strange thing that happened was that when we were both discussing it a few days later, she wanted to retrace the route that she took that night and try to determine where it had happened exactly, and her latitude history for that little stretch of time was missing. She looked at all the records of the texts that we sent back and forth, both on her phone and on mine. Now, we both have Google Voice, and it saves every text and phone call. Yet, there was no trace of any of the text on either end. It was very strange. So 2 weeks after this, my daughter came to visit me in California. She had done a movie shoot in Roswell, and she told me this story. She was shooting a movie about aliens, and she wanted a location in Roswell, so she brought her equipment and crew members out to Roswell. They shot the scenes and ended up going to have to spend the night there. So she went to the hotel and paid for several rooms for herself and her crew members for the night. Now, upon going to bed, she discovered, as did the rest of the crew members in each of their own rooms, that the bed mattresses and box springs were covered with massive blood stains. There were not a mattress or box spring in the whole hotel that didn't have a blood stain on it. Why? Why would the whole hotel be filled with mattresses covered with blood? Very scary. Needless to say, they left and will not be returning. Now, I redacted the name of the hotel in the post, and I did a follow up. I did call the hotel and explained the situation, namely the reported blood on the beds. The manager actually acknowledged that they were aware of the allegations but would not comment any further. I checked with the Chavez County, New Mexico health authorities and was told that this particular hotel has only received complaints for bed bugs. I contacted a colleague who lives in Artesia, New Mexico, and travels to Roswell several times a week on business. He states that there have been several incidents reported of people being run off the road by unknown flying craft, especially on Route 285 north from Roswell. So this next witness states to me, "Hi, Lon. I enjoy listening and reading your personal encounters with guardian angels. I feel personally touched when you discuss it on your podcast and when you're interviewed. Now, when I was around 16 years old, I was home alone in the middle of the day. I was in my parents' room folding clothes. They have a big bedroom, bed at the back and couch, sitting area up for the front room to the front porch. I have the washed clothes tipped out on the couch and folding and sorting into piles in my own world. I was leaning over with hair hanging over the side of my face, sort of obscuring my vision. Anyway, through my hair and from the corner of my eye, I see an Asian woman. She's wearing a long white dress, her hair pinned up, an umbrella is in one hand, and she's staring my way. She looked like someone dressed from 100 years ago. She slowly points to the front door with the other hand, and within seconds is gone. I'm completely freaked out, and my 16-year-old brain thinks the most logical thing is to run and lock the front door. I go into the kitchen to call my mom and find out when she's coming home when the doorbell rings. Thinking it was my mom was shopping, she'd usually ring if she had a handful to get us to come out and help her and give help with the rest. I ran down the hallway and opened the door for her. It's a man I'd never seen before. He's dressed in plain clothes, says he's here to check the pool. Now, we had pool maintenance maybe once a month, but he asked if my parents were home. I tell him that, yes, my dad's in the shower. If a stranger asks us, we're told to always say that if we're home alone. He sort of smiles and says, "No, he isn't. Can I come in and check the pool?" At that point, I hear a voice in my right ear that says, "Be strong. Don't let him in the house." Then I feel a hand calmly stroke the right side of my face. I'm getting super freaked, but I'm now calm, trying to keep my ground and tell him he has to use the side gate, which is normal procedure, and then he tries to open the door. He tells me again he needs to come in. I immediately shut the door in his face and called my dad, who was around the corner. He's home in minutes, and the guy's gone. No pool guy on site. They called to see if they had someone else had scheduled, and we didn't. I still think about it almost 20 years later when I had my guardian angel with me that day. I told my mom about the experience not long ago. She smiled and told me, "I know." Now, this next witness states, "I want to tell you about an experience I had. It was 1980, and it was on the 1st of November. We were out coon hunting one night, and we were on the edge of a hayfield near the woods. We turned our dogs loose, and they took off. Me and my uncle were standing there, and we noticed a light in the sky moving like a triangle. It would go to one corner and be red. Go to the next corner, it would be blue. Go to the next corner, it would be white. Go to the next corner, it would be orange. We watched it for about 10 minutes, and then it went to the center of the triangle. I mean, not a triangle, I mean rectangle. And this bolt came out of the sky and hit it, and it split into 4 different pieces and took off. Well, when the bolts came out of the sky, almost like electricity went through us. All the hair stood up on our arms. I looked at my uncle and I said, "What in the world is that?" He was just standing there, completely stiff. His eyes were glassed over and completely black. I grabbed him and shook him, and he just fell over. When he got up, he was asking me what was going on. He remembers nothing about it. And to this day, he still remembers nothing. It's kind of weird because after that happened to him, he found religion. I mean, almost fanatical. He to this day says he remembers nothing about it. I don't remember it happening. And like I said, his eyes were they were like black orbs on his head. To hear him explain why he found religion, he thinks it was a negative experience, that God told him to get religious. Like I said, I asked him several times what was going through your head when you were standing there before you fell over. He says, "I have no idea." He says, "I don't know. I don't remember seeing anything. I don't remember feeling anything. I don't remember anything about it." I think that there were 4 UFOs there, and that lightning bolt or energy beam or whatever it was refueling them. They were sitting there making that rectangle, waiting for that fueling, because as soon as it hit, like I said, we felt it. We felt it, and boom, it was like the 4 of them split apart and they just were gone in a blink of an eye. Now, I got to ask, could UFO incidents have a connection to black-eyed people? Is there something to that? You know, I've had a lot of people state that there very well may be some connection. You know, in the past experience, they've told me they've had found religion after UFO and alien encounters. As well, many of these people have said that alien beings, in particular higher order aliens, have told them that they are spiritually committed to a supreme energy. Is this really any different than how humans describe their spiritual beliefs? So this next account, witness states to me, "Hello, sir. My name is Fred. I've got a story that may be hard to believe, but I avow to you that is completely true. I have lived on the same property in Smythe County, Virginia, for almost 68 years, and I have seen many strange things, though I believe all were natural. But there was one thing in my woods that I have never been able to explain. The first time I saw it, I was 16 or so and was squirrel hunting in the late afternoon. I was sitting on a large rock watching a den hole in a large hickory tree when I noticed a hairy man running in the hollow below me. It was covered top to bottom with short reddish brown hair. The hair on his head and face were very long. I think it was around 7 foot tall. He made a hell of a racket moving through the brush, crashing branches and grunting up a storm. It then turned around and did the same thing on its way back. I stood up and quickly made my way home. I never said anything to my folks about what I'd seen. That's the last I had seen of this thing until this past October 2023. I was dragging old tree branches down into the woods when I stumbled on a tree root. I twisted my knee badly and I couldn't stand on it. I lay on the ground in pain trying to figure out what I was going to do. Then all of a sudden I wake up on the porch bench. It's totally dark. I reach over and turn on the porch light. How did I get here? Then I noticed mud on my clothes and mud on the porch floor. There was also a pile of hand-sized creek pebbles on the porch table. I had seen these piles of pebbles throughout the woods for as long as I could remember. That's when I realized that the hairy man in the woods must have brought me home. I wonder if it was the same hairy man I saw when I was a boy. That's the only explanation I can come up with. I don't have any neighbors since I'm living on the ridge. May I see it again one day? I yelled Fred, and he agreed posting the story. Now, Smythe County is located in southwest Virginia. I asked him if he thought it was Bigfoot, and he said, well, maybe, but I never heard of one around here. But I can attest that southwest Virginia has many reports of Bigfoot and other cryptids. So in early March 2022, there were claims of a long cylindrical UFO or unknown craft hovering over Kiev, Ukraine. Some Ukrainian troops stated Russian tanks were fired upon. It was also claimed that one particular craft had quickly maneuvered up at an angle and then across the Ukrainian city and then repeated the process again. Now, similar claims were made during the Fukushima, Japan nuclear reactor leak when a news video taken accidentally caught a long, white, tic-tac shaped UFO flying low and slow over the reactor. Could there be a connection between the two incidents? Subsequently, some Ukrainian soldiers have claimed that they were saved by a UFO. Now, the report states that a UFO is said to have saved Ukrainian troops from Russian tanks in a miracle lightning attack. During an episode of The Global Lane on CBN News, CBN Ukraine director said that he believes his fellow countrymen are experiencing some divine intervention amid the ongoing war with Russia. He explained that one of his countrymen called up his father from the front line and that the son was terrified as Russian President Vladimir Putin's forces approached. The father prayed for help with members of his church, and the help eventually came from out of this world. The director continued, he was saying that his son was part of the military. In the dark night, they were holding their positions and discovered that a lot of Russian Federation tanks and machines were coming at them. He picks up his phone and calls his father. He said, "Dad, you have to pray right now. We're in a situation." His father rings other members of the church and they start praying. Sometime later, the son allegedly rang his father again. He says some miracle has happened. It looked like some spaceship. There was an attack from some spacecraft. There was some kind of lightning shooting from the sky and the sparks were spreading everywhere. Then in the morning, they discovered all the machinery was destroyed. All those soldiers thought maybe it had been done by some weapon we didn't know about or that it was just God's intervention. The CBN director revealed that this mystery attack isn't the only example of God answering Ukrainian prayers and acting against Russian forces. He went on to describe how a friend was praying for Russians to turn on themselves, only for that to happen. Now, I asked, is it possible that otherworldly beings have chosen to assist the Ukrainians against the Russians? During World War II, people talked about the Foo Fighters and how they were seen by bombardiers coming from U.S. and British bombardier coming from UK over into Germany. Some of those soldiers and some of those pilots believe that it did help them. That it kind of deflected some of the flak coming their way. It's hard to tell, but there may have been some otherworldly intervention in this Ukrainian war as well as what happened back in World War II. Now, this next account is a true account. In light of the horrific incidents of school shootings, the following post may bring some solace to those who believe in miracles and the divine spirit. Some places and dates are branded by disaster, by the stories of one horrible day that no one can forget, like 9/11, Oklahoma City, Columbine. What sets this horrible day apart from others is what didn't happen. The small town of Cokeville, Wyoming, was the site of a parent's worst nightmare on May 16, 1986, when a mentally disturbed man and his wife entered an elementary school with guns and homemade gasoline bomb. Now, the man's name was David Young, a former town marshal. He had been the tiny town's only police officer for 6 months in 1979, and when he was fired for misconduct, he moved to Tucson, Arizona. He and his wife returned to Cokeville in 1986 and carried out their insidious plan. Young had a manifesto called Zero Infinity and proclaimed this is a revolution, as he and his wife took an entire generation of 160 children and teachers hostage and wouldn't release him until he was given $300 million and a personal phone call from Ronald Reagan, who was president of the United States. Keeping all the children in a single room and standing in the middle of it, the Youngs began a standoff that would last 2.5 hours. David left the room, leaving his wife alone, and it was then that the bomb went off, instantly killing Doris. The bomb had been on a shopping cart, and though it was homemade, it was powerful enough to destroy a section of the school. Moments before the explosion, Young handed the shoelace and clothespins to his wife and went across the hall to the bathroom. Doris Young apparently didn't realize how sensitive the trigger mechanism was and accidentally caused it to go off. Now, the blast knocked Williams off her feet. The room erupted in chaos as children ran screaming in the dark, smoke-filled room, while many kids, including their friend Amber Kemp and Brandy Prowse, escaped through the window. Williams crawled through the light at the doorway. She crossed paths with David Young at the door, and he tried to grab her shirt, but the tide of running children prevented him. She escaped but saw flames on her shirt and felt an odd tickling sensation on her shoulder. She started rolling to try to put it out, but the burning sensation only intensified. Now, she was saved from further burns when some teachers found her and slapped out the flames. Then they told her to run. Running towards the blast, Young started to randomly spray the area with gunfire. Some kids were grazed by whizzing bullets, but none were hit. Through the chaos, everyone was eventually accounted for except for the Youngs. Upon finding his burning wife, Young shot her and then returned to the bathroom and then shot himself. Now, the miraculous thing is that despite the shooting and the detonation of the bomb, the Youngs were the only casualties. Some children and teachers suffered severe flash burns from the explosion and minor bullet wounds, but all were alive. In the last 20 plus years, this event has been called or known as the Miracle of Cokeville. But the story runs deeper. Bomb experts called out to the scene and were stunned. They couldn't figure out why the school was still intact when a bomb that size should have obliterated the entire side of the building, leaving everyone, the hostage takers and the hostages, all dead. How was this possible? To this day, no one has provided an explanation. The children and teachers were alive, and that was all that apparently mattered. Then the children began to tell stories of angels who appeared to them and instructed them to move to a corner of the classroom because the bomb was about to explode. Some reported seeing beautiful figures in white, while others said they saw long-dead relatives telling them not to be afraid. Many said later that there was an angel in the room for every child and that each was protecting their charge. Some children said that they didn't see anything, but rather heard disembodied voices telling them that the disaster was about to happen and that they would be spared. Glenna Walker's children said a beautiful lady who told them to go near the window right before the explosion. When looking at a picture in a locket later, one of the children identified the lady as Walker's deceased mother. Amy Bagasso Williams was a fifth grader, the girl I mentioned earlier, at the time of the incident. Now, more recently, she said, you come to realize there are no coincidences. Too many things happened to the point that all of us survived that day. It was not an accident. It was a loving Heavenly Father who had a plan for all these children. He prevented it from turning into a horrible tragedy. Now, Williams had third-degree burns on her face, neck, and back. Because there were more than 75 injured, ambulances were dispatched to Montpelier, Idaho, Kemmer, Wyoming, and Evanston, Wyoming, and Utah. Her parents drove her to Montpelier, where the hospital had not received word of the bombing. Get prepared for a long night, Williams told them. Her father told them. Now, Williams was lying in a hospital bed when she learned two priests were going room to room giving blessings. She asked for a blessing. The blessing said Heavenly Father was there and and watched over us, and he loves us. And although this terrible thing happened and my body was burned horribly, that I would heal and have no scars. She said with emotion, the scars I would have to overcome would be scars of forgiveness and trust. Now, her pediatrician didn't think such a promise was realistic, but Williams, feeling the same peaceful feeling she had felt earlier, believed the blessing. New skin grew in, and to this day she has no scarring despite severe burns. It was a miracle. I healed completely. No one has any idea I was in the Cokeville bombing, she said. So, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them up there, and the moderators will give them to me. You have any questions, folks? Okay, yes. So let's put some questions up there. Dagnammit, do you know why when a cryptid is walking around the woods, everything becomes quiet? Um, I think it has to do with the predator reaction by the smaller animals or such in the woods. I mean, for whatever reason, they do sense a predator or something that they're not really familiar with or are familiar with, and react by just keeping quiet. Even the insects keep quiet. You know, that's always fascinated me too. How do insects detect something like that? But I have experienced that. Um, I never saw a predator, but I would, I used to go hunting. That would happen all the time. Even walking through the woods, it has happened at point. And normally when it does happen, you got to be aware of your surroundings. Maybe there is a predator. I think other animals and such react to that. Can Squatch, do you think relatives that appear have not gone over to the other side? Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that some energies have the ability to come back into our reality. Somehow, I really don't know the mechanism for that, but it does seem to happen. These beings that show up like that are not those that are stuck here. They do seem to have some mechanism for whatever reason to move back in and to comfort family members. We've all heard of when people are dying and they see relatives before they die and they start trying to communicate with them. I think that may very well be the same thing. That there's some pull there. Something happens that when there's certain experiences or emergencies that these beings are able to manifest and help their living relatives or living friends and such. So, as far as the Cokeville incident, I've always found that fascinating because it does seem that may very well have happened in that instance. Berg Fruling, have you heard anything about Nick Redfern lately? No, I don't know what you're talking about. If you have, let me know. But I haven't heard anything about it. I haven't talked to Nick in a while. Jose Sanchez, what do you think about photos showing angelic forms next to accident sites? True or hoax or both? I don't know. I guess it could easily be a hoax, but I have presented and posted photographs of what people consider angels or considered souls leaving the body or life energy leaving the body. Uh, and as well, somebody could manipulate that. It's hard to tell. I guess each instance is different. I guess under the circumstances, what had happened. But I think it's possible. For those who have intuitive abilities like myself, who's able to sense and see energy at some points, I think it's possible. Paranormalism Net. Can we have everyone together in the chat next week? One chat room. I don't know. I mean, are there several chats going on? You know what? I think I know what's going on. I went ahead and it's coming up on two of them because I flicked on the YouTube icon, so it's going over on two different ones. That's my mistake. That won't happen again. I was wondering what everybody was talking about. Okay. Yeah, we'll take care of that next week. It was an accident, sorry. Yeah, Kevin's telling me. Okay. No problem. We'll take care of it. Dagnammit, what was the sighting of the Mothman at Point Pleasant before the bridge collapsed? What was the sighting? Well, there were about 30 sightings, if not more, before that. What was it? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's anybody's guess what the Mothman actually is. I mean, is it an actual being, or is it some type of spirit? I personally believe after all the investigations we've done in Chicago that these are real beings. Now, granted, what people are seeing out in Chicago is somewhat different than what had happened at Point Pleasant. But I do believe the Mothman at Point Pleasant was a sentinel of some type. That was summoned there by a strong indigenous spirit that was there seeking protection by some type of interdimensional being. I've heard so many EVPs and such that have come out of that the area around the TNT plant or the West Virginia Ordnance Works plant, and I do have some. I gotta find them. I do have some recordings with some of those, and it does sound like this creature was summoned somehow. I don't have the copyright to it. I can try and ask whoever took it to allow me to put it out there. Maybe I'll do an EVP show sometime where we can get everything out there, because I do have several from different cases and others that we've collected during investigations. Any other questions, folks? Okay, well, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you donated, it's truly appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to consider for this show or for Phantoms Monsters blog, feel free to forward to my email at lonstrickler@phantomsmonsters.com. As well, check my daily blog at phantomsmonsters.com. So until we meet again next week, next Friday night, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend and have a good night. Talk later.